Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jack Canfield, and today with me is Dr. Anthony Criniti. I should say Anthony Criniti IV, also known as Dr. Finance. And Dr. Criniti is a world-renowned finance professor. He's a financial scientist, an investor, a survivalist, and an explorer who's traveled around the world studying various aspects of finance. He's also an award-winning author of 3 #1 best-selling finance books: The Necessity of Finance, The Most Important Lessons in Economics and Finance, and his most recent book, The Survival of the Richest. And as a prolific writer, he also frequently contributes articles to Entrepreneur, to Medium, and to Thrive Global. And Dr. Criniti's works have started a grassroots movement that is changing the way people think about economics and finance. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Jack. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm really glad to have you because I think finance is so important. I think most people in the world are financially illiterate, so we can help maybe resolve some of that with your work today and in your books. So let's start about talking about how you got started teaching in the world of finance. I mean, what put you on this mission?
Well, that's a great question, Jack. It's actually pretty complicated answer, but I'll try to give the best I can. I grew up in the poorest, largest city in America, Philadelphia. And I basically had 4 grandparents that were poor. And so I started out poor and basically had many different spectrums of wealth that I touched on in my life. So I'll share a little bit about the story for you. Some pivoting moments. When I was younger, I grew up in a home that was a rental home, didn't have much money. But I had a father who had an entrepreneurial spirit, and around the age 2 or 3, he was smart enough to latch onto a business that was up and coming. It was the video business. He became very successful with it, and over the years, the business increased its revenue. And at one point, he actually had about 17 franchises throughout the city. And then about 5 to 6, maybe 7 years later, suddenly things started to turn. So every Saturday night, the head manager would come to the house and drop off the week's pay. And one Saturday he came and the envelope was about halfway full. And we started noticing a trend. Everything was going down a little bit. The profits weren't that high as it used to be. A few weeks later, a little bit less. And as time went on, the envelope got pretty thin. And one day that I remember, I was sitting in my basement on, I think it was a black pleather couch. And I was watching TV. It was a Saturday night, probably about 5 or 6 o'clock. I don't know, I was probably watching the A-Team or, forced to watch Dallas. I was just a kid about 10 years old. And I hear a knock on the door. I thought maybe it was the pizza guy, but it was my dad's manager. He shows up. He has that yellow envelope that he usually brings. But today was different. He actually had, the envelope was flat, and he was very frightened looking, very upset, worried. And I didn't understand why. And then he opened up the envelope. There was nothing in there. And my dad's reaction was something I'll never forget. I knew at that moment that was a pivoting point, that we were going to go through some hard times. So fast forward the next 2-3 years, I basically spent every one of my weekends and free days going to a place called the Berlin Market. And we had to sell all those videotapes and unload the inventory. So within the next 2-3 years, he was completely out of the business. But that's where I learned how to become an entrepreneur. I sold everything at these markets, all those videotapes. I sold anything I get my hands on, candy, toys, whatever a 10-year-old sells. But my dad had a major shift, which shifted the whole financial picture of the family for the next 5 to 10 years until he became successful in his next line of business. That was one pivoting moment that basically led to where I was. The second was fast forward about the year 2000. I graduated college, and so actually, let me step back a little bit before that. I went on a program called Semester T around 19 that changed my life. I grew up in a relatively rough environment in the 80s and 90s. Philly was very poor at the time. Got myself in a lot of trouble. But this program called Semester at Sea changed my life. So I went on this program where I went on a ship around the world, saw all different poor countries, and having been homeless at one point, at my lowest point, I always thought, you know, that we have it bad in America. But then when I saw all these different impoverished countries, this was in the 90s, I realized how fortunate we really are. So, you know, for example, I went to India, one of the places, and I actually had a person come up to me to give me their baby and say, "You can do better than me." And I felt it was really a warm, touchy moment where it was, you really put everything in perspective, that even the poorest person in America really has a lot. You know, even if you lived on the homeless compared to the rest of the world, we have a lot. So that was a big pivoting moment for me in terms of learning wealth. Fast forward after college. Okay, so 4 years of college, being free. I lived in Washington, D.C., went to GW, came home to the real world again, to realize back in Philadelphia, the place I left 4 years ago that almost, you know, put me down on my knees. I have to go back into this environment. Very difficult head start. When people graduate college, people, you know, general sentiment is, all right, I'm going to graduate college. At least I felt this way. And I'll have the dream job all lined up for me. Well, it didn't work out that way. I actually winded up back in my parents' house, stuck on the top bunk bed of my parents' house in a small bedroom with my brother. And every night I would climb up the ladder that was horizontal ladder, metal, heavy metal, and the bed was broken. So I would fall off. Either I'd fall off or I'd fall down the fake ladder to get to get out of the bed. So this went on, and I realized, wow, I went from night and day, where I was on a ship sailing around the world 2 years before, and here I am stuck, broke, don't have a job, college is over, and my dream, you know, was not even being realized. I have to get out of this house. I got to be free. And so the next 2.5 years, I fought my way to get to buy my own house at age 23, saving up my pennies. And I actually got accepted to work at Vanguard. And before age 24, I moved $500,000 $500 million in rollover IRAs before age 24. So things were looking up again, but here was another pivotal moment in life. Fast forward, one more pivotal moment I'll give you that really led to where I am. 2008. So after Vanguard, I had my own financial business, was a financial planner for a while. Also did real estate on the side, was doing a lot of developing, and went on a cross-country tour in 2007, and things were looking great, you know. And then in 2008, all of a sudden, everything dropped. I was insolvent, had debt in the millions, and life was a struggle. Had a newborn on the way, was getting my PhD, and was completely broke, and I owed so much debt. It was suffocating me. So I had to make a major pivot there. What I wound up doing was I closed out my financial planning business. I had to build real estate, my projects. The banks wanted me to finish up my projects so that I could rent them, and I had to rent them to pay the mortgage. So that's what happened over the next few years. Had to dig myself out of that hole, and it was an unbelievable experience. I fought my way out of it. Insolvent, didn't go bankrupt. I also pivoted to become a finance professor, because I thought, what else can I do? What else am I good at? Real estate, I can't do that now. We have the Great Recession. I can't do financial planning because no one has any money. I was working with regular people that had a hard time putting $50 in a Roth IRA. So from advice of one of my friends, he said, why don't you go teach? So I became an online professor of finance. Okay. So I at my peak, I had 6 universities I was teaching at. And over the next 10 plus years, I basically taught every finance class under the sun, from undergrad to graduate level finance, to doctoral finance. And about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I realized that education is just a business, and I need to break out on my own if I really want to take it to the next level. So as a financial planner in my 20s, I taught people, usually people of one or two or small families. As a professor, I taught classes of 35 and under, and now I'd like to teach the world. So I'm sort of moving into a different direction here, and fast forward to the pandemic, been going full steam ever since. Always pivoting though, that's the key though, Jack. Always pivot. Whenever there's something bad that has happened, that's an opportunity to make yourself better, not to be discouraged and put a weight on your head and just push yourself through the floor. Instead, you have to do the opposite. And that's sort of the story of my life. Always finding the opportunities in times of chaos.
So obviously, a lot of us have had to pivot during the pandemic, as you did as well. I'm just curious now, you've taught all these finance courses, a whole number of universities online and so forth. Obviously, you think finance is important, and a lot of people obviously think that as well, or they wouldn't be studying with you. But I don't think most people really spend that much time thinking about it. Why is it important? Why should people be putting more attention on it?
Oh my God, that's a great question, Jack. Finance is so important. It is some of the conclusions that I came upon. My first book, The Necessity of Finance, I wrote for my students about in 2012, 13, it was published. I wrote it, and the message that one of the main conclusions I got from that was the necessity of finance. That's why I titled it, You Need Finance. It's not, oh, well, maybe I'll take a look at it. It's an interesting subject. No, everybody needs it because it's about life and death. It's an extension of survival. That's the way I see it. And to learn about how to manage your wealth is one of the most important things you can do for you or your family, because it's a problem that will never go away if you don't manage your wealth properly. It will actually go the opposite direction, and you can force yourself to struggle in so many ways in life.
And have you found out I'm just curious, given all the beliefs people have about finance, have you found that there's a belief that a lot of people have that's just not true?
Yeah, I would say one of the major beliefs they have is that, finance is boring. And I just, that's just such nonsense. Things that I learned not only on the field personally, combating insolvency back in 2008, but as a financial planner, helping clients out as a finance professor, it is so important to learn finance. It can never be boring as people perceive it. What is boring is the way it might be taught, but the reality of the science is that is as close to exciting as you could possibly get. If you went to the casino and you spent $100,000, maybe everything you own, and put it on black or red at the roulette table, and you lost, how exciting would that be? It's negative exciting, right? It's actually, you'd be so upset. Your emotions would be boiling in the negative direction. If you won $100,000, you'd be extremely exciting. Now I'm illustrating using gambling as an example, but it's the same mechanical processes that work if you were to invest it and won 100,000, which was all your money, or lost all your money. It's the same idea. All that extreme emotion is created because of minimization or maximization of wealth. When you make money or you lose money, there's emotion attached at every point. So most people don't look at it that way. They're seeing, formulas and finance, and it's all abstract. But when you bring it to the practical level, we can't live without it. We need it. You can't turn your back on it. And as one of my principles and the most important lessons in economics states, the history of money explains everything in history. From the beginning of time, money has always just follow the money, and that will tell you the answer to almost every problem you can think of, including at the personal level. How have you ended up in this situation? Money. And money is a product of the science of finance and economics.
So we only have a few minutes left, but I'm going to ask you two more questions.
Yes, sir.
What inspired you to write your last book, The Survival of the Richest? We always hear the survival of the fittest, evolutionary, but the survival of the richest. Very curious with that. What was the inspiration to write that?
Oh, geez, that's a big question, Jack. The Survival of the Richest. What a crazy topic. What a crazy book. 500 plus pages. All started with the necessity of finance. I kept coming up with the conclusion that survival is so important. Finance is an extension of survival. Everything's about life and death. And that idea kept festering in my head, which led to the second book. By the time I got past my second book, I said, that's it. I have to study survival because there's some connection beyond what I'm talking about that's really relevant that could lead me in the right path. Because I kept saying, is it me? Is it my bias with the martial art background? Maybe I'm biased that I keep coming up with the word struggle and survival. But no, as I found out in the conclusions of that book, it is tied to the hip of survival. Finance is actually an extension of survival. And contrary to what people think, economics is an extension of finance, not the other way around. It's taught that finance is a product of economics. Actually, all the Nobel Memorial Prizes in finance were based in economics, starting from the 1950s. Completely wrong. The definition I give in the first book of finance is very important for what finance is. It's the science of the management of wealth for an individual, a group, and an organization. Economics is the science of the management of wealth for nations or divisions of nations. So similar because they manage wealth, but one has to do with the person, the other has to do with the nation. Nations can do things that people can't do. They can maneuver inflation rates and create money. We can't do that as regular people. That's why the sciences need to be split. So going back to the survival book, survival, every entity, whether it's us, the individuals, groups, businesses, or even bigger countries, we all have to survive first. And then we walk through the process of prospering. So when they say survive and prosper, the sciences of prosperity, which I call for the names of finance and economics, are stages starting from survival, goes into finance, economics, and actually you can extend all the way out to the universonomics. So the survival of the richest is important because it's not as it really you might think it is. It's really, we are the richest. We're the richest people, the richest species on the planet, humanity. We have the money, we have the power, we control this world. We can make it better with our money. If we want to survive as the richest species and the richest on the richest planet, which is the most important for us, we got everything we need here on Earth. We need to unite and also to manage our wealth better. And that's one of the key points of that title.
I think you alluded to this in your last answer, but talk about what is a financialist versus what is an economist.
Oh, great question, Jack. Very important, actually. So economists, they have their term. The scientist of economics is an economist. They've always had that. They had a head start on modern finance. They've been around about 250 years. Modern finance only came around about 1950s with Harry Markowitz. They have their own scientists. Well, finance needs its own scientists. We don't have a name for it until 2013. In the first book, The Necessity of Finance, I called it the financialist. So scientists of finance are financialists, to be separated from an economist, which is a scientist of economics. This will put the whole spectrum into better play and also set finance up to be on the better path to eventually get their own Nobel Prize. We need a Nobel Prize in finance as the Nobel Prize in economics is for economists. We need our own Nobel Prize. And first it starts with having a label for what we are, the financial scientists, financialists.
Well, given that finance, as you said, is a life or death issue, we all need to understand the survival, not only of our own self, our families, our wealth, our country, our species, as you say. How can people find out about your books? How can they contact you and your work?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you, Jack. Well, my books can be found anywhere that they sell books. So mostly Amazon, but you can find it on Apple, etc. My website is where you can find out more information about me, drfinance.info. That's drfinance.info. But I'm also on all the social media platforms, including Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and even now Clubhouse. So that's a new platform for speaking.
Very good. Well, first of all, thanks for writing the books. We all need, as I said, I think we live in a culture of financial illiteracy, and a lot of people are suffering needlessly because of that. So thanks for writing the books. Thanks for being on our show today. Really appreciate it. And keep up the good work.
Thank you, Jack. It was an honor to be here. It was a pleasure. Anytime you need me to come back, just let me know.
Okay, will do. And thank you at home for watching. If you want to know more about finance, about how to manage your wealth, your money, and also keep the species around, which I think is important, because Dr. Criniti goes into a wide range of understanding about all this. Make sure you check him out. You got the information on your screen there. And thank you for joining us. And we will see you next week with another great guest, an author who is making a difference in the world and help you take your life to a higher level of abundance and prosperity and happiness and joy. So take care.